Chapter 456. Sukuching, I was wrong. I shouldn't have been jealous of you. I shouldn't have tried to harm you. I was really wrong. I admit my mistake, she said incoherently to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin seemed to be frightened by her behavior. She took a step back helplessly, and a hand supported her from behind. It was He Junyan. At this moment, among the few people who had been guarding the bed, a well-dressed middle-aged man and woman walked up to Gu Xingyin. This must be Su Kuching, right? I'm Su Qing's mother. I'm really sorry about what happened to Qing this time. The woman looked to be in her 30s. Her well-maintained face was deeply apologetic. We're all classmates. Can you forgive our Qing? The woman looked at Gu Xingyin eagerly. She listened to her daughter. This incident was actually targeted at this girl. If this girl named Su Kuching didn't take it to heart, the subsequent incident wouldn't be so serious. From the moment Su Kuching entered the room, she had been sizing her up. This girl's clothes and accessories were out of the ordinary. Her eyes were filled with arrogance. One look and she could tell that she was a pampered young lady who grew up being pampered by her family. This kind of girl was the easiest to soften her heart. He Junyan frowned and pulled Su Kuching behind him. He said coldly to Su Qing's mother, "Madam, we're all parents. I can understand that you're thinking of your daughter, but as Su Kuching's guardian, I can't tolerate other people harboring evil intentions on her. Let's get to the bottom of this first. What did your daughter intend to do to our Qing? Su Qing's mother looked at her daughter worriedly. They had been guarding her the whole night. Su Qing had basically said everything she wanted to say. This was what Su Qing's mother was thinking. From another perspective, if someone had wanted to do that to her daughter, she would have fought them to the death. How could she forgive them? Sure enough, when He Junyan found out that Su Qing had only wanted to scare Su Kuching out of jealousy, and had even wanted to tear her clothes and ruin her innocence, his handsome face could only be described as dark clouds. You don't have to apologize. I have no reason to forgive this. He Junyan looked coldly at Su Qing's parents who seemed to be ashamed. What should we do? That's it. We've seen them. We'll leave first. He nodded at the two policemen and left with Gu Xingyin. The other girls and teacher Li Xiaoxiao who stayed in the ward were shocked. They knew that it was Su Qing's doing and comforted themselves that it was just a girl's prank, and that she meant no harms done. However, no one would have thought that behind this prank, there was actually such a malicious intention. And what they had seen to have been so provokes hats toozes. Assess des have, t-tes and her, s and her. Anti-is. It was a pity that they would never be able to find out. Uncle He, my hand hurts. Gu Xingyin shouted with a frown. He Junyan loosened his grip on Gu Xingyin's hand, but he still held it tightly. It was as if he was afraid that if he let go, something would happen to his precious treasure that he had raised. He was really scared now. What if that girl named Su Qing had gotten her way? What would happen to his Qing? He didn't dare to think of that possibility at all. He was afraid that he would go crazy if he thought of it. Chapter 457. Uncle He. Gu Xingyin was a little puzzled. Just as they arrived at the parking lot, the man who had been pulling her forward suddenly stopped and hugged her tightly in his arms. She could sense the man's uneasiness, so she obediently let him hug her. But this place was not considered remote. There were already a few passers-by looking at them curiously. Thank goodness you're fine, He Junyan said in a low voice. Gu Xingyin comforted him this time. I'll be fine. Uncle He, don't forget that I'm trained. He Junyan was amused by her. Yes, I know. My Qing is the best. Although he said that, he was already thinking about what kind of bodyguards he should find for Qing. After all, Su Qing was a minor. She did not cause any substantial harm to Su Kuching, so she was only sentenced to half a year of detention. However, the school would definitely not accept such a student again. In the end, Su Qing was expelled from school. The reason given by the school was that she had taken a leave of absence due to illness. The homeroom teacher, Teacher Li, also forbade the students from discussing this topic. Many students were concerned about the class monitor, but they could not get through to Su Qing's phone number and could not contact her. No one knew where she was. The only ones who knew the truth were the 6 girls who went on the adventure together. However, the homeroom teacher, Teacher Lee, talked to them one by one and told them not to casually talk about this in school. Time passed by day. When Gu Xingyin turned 15, she finally graduated from junior high school and was about to enter senior high school. To He Junyan, this news wasn't very pleasant. Gu Xingyin attended a 4-person elite school. The difference was that she could attend day school in junior high school, but she had to stay on campus in senior high school. Ever since Gu Xingyin came to the He family at the age of 10, the longest time she had been apart from He Junyan was when he went on a business trip. Now it would be an entire month before they could see each other again. He Junyan snapped out of his daze and laughed inwardly at himself. He was so used to being a stay-at-home dad that he could not bear to part with her for a month. On Gu Xingyin's 15th birthday, which was a week before high school started, He Junyan held a small birthday party for her. Instead of inviting his business partners, he invited Gu Xingyin's good friends and classmates. Wow. Qing, I knew your family was rich, but I didn't expect you to be so rich. Rose said exaggeratedly. That's right, Qing, this little nouveau riche in the future, we have to exploit her well. The other girl who spoke was also one of the girls who went on the expedition together. Although that experience was frightening, it also gave them a sense of camaraderie, and they quickly became good friends. He Junyan did not make an appearance at the banquet for the youngsters. In this kind of situation, there were no parents around, so they could play freely. He even made an exception, and allowed Gu Xingyin to drink some wine. Gu Xingyin decided to do something big while she was drunk. Otherwise, with He Junyan's slow personality, he would probably still be happily playing the role of dad. Youngsters were crazy when they played. By the time everything was over and Gu Xingyin instructed the butler to send her classmates home, it was already 1:00 in the morning. He Junyan did not sleep. He was afraid that the youngsters would go crazy and he would not feel at ease until he saw it for himself. Chapter 458. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on his door. Before he could open the door, the person outside pushed the door open and walked in. He Junyan didn't even need to look to know that Gu Xingyin was drunk. She wouldn't have done something so impolite when she was sober. As expected, Gu Xingyin walked in with a bottle of wine in her arms and 2 glasses in her hands. The moment she walked in, He Junyan smelled the strong scent of alcohol. How much did you drink? Little drunk cat. He Junyan just wanted to face-bomb. Gu Xingyin just looked at him and giggled. Her steps were steady as she walked to the cabinet in the room. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to He Junyan. Uncle He, I'm so happy today. Come, let's have a toast. Before He Junyan could stop her, she had already picked up the glass in her hand and downed it in one gulp. He Junyan laughed. Red wine isn't meant to be drunk like that. Although he said that, he still downed the glass in his hand in one gulp. Gu Xingyin suddenly stared at him without blinking. Being stared at like that, He Junyan felt a strange feeling in his heart. Qing, is there something you need? Gu Xingyin nodded seriously. Uncle He, I have something important to tell you. Uncle He waited for her to say what it was, amused. In his eyes, the young lady was drunk. Not only were her cheeks as white as jade, but even the corners of her eyes were red. What could it be? She was probably just drunk talk. Gu Xingyin mysteriously took a step forward. The two of them were very close to each other. Her breath, mixed with the smell of alcohol, filled his territory. He Junyan suddenly felt his heart beat a little faster. Then he heard the young lady say, Uncle He, close your eyes. Don't move. He Junyan closed his eyes as he wished. He wanted to see what this little drunkard was going to do. After that, he felt a warm and soft touch on his lips. He Junyan instinctively stuck out his tongue and licked it. It was very soft and had a hint of red wine. It made him want to taste more. Wait a minute. He suddenly realized what this was. Opening his eyes, He Junyan took a step back as if he had been scalded. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. He looked at Gu Xingyin with an inexplicable expression and asked, Qing, what are you doing? Gu Xingyin's eyes were filled with this man. I'm kissing you. I like you, Uncle He. She pouted. You used to ask me if I had someone I liked. It's you. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head, Hee-Junyan said sternly, "Soo-Kaching, do you know what you are saying? My Hee-Junyan is your uncle." When he said this, he was resolute and decisive, as if he was telling Gu Xingyin, but also warning himself. He realized that he didn't feel disgusted when the girl he raised kissed him. He even had the thought of delving deeper. This wasn't right. Gu Xingyin said clearly, "I know you are my uncle He. You raised me and I like you. We are not related by blood. Why can't we be together?" Hee-Junyan closed his eyes and pointed at the door. "You are drunk, Qing. Get out of my room now." He didn't look at her. He didn't need to look to know that at this moment, his little girl must be looking at him with her big watery eyes. That expression was one that he couldn't refuse. He was afraid that if he saw it, he wouldn't be able to harden his heart. Chapter 459. Gu Xingyin looked at him sadly. "Uncle He, you don't like Qing?" Hee-Junyan said coldly, "I like Qing, but it's the kind of love an elder has for a younger generation, not the kind you want." Gu Xingyin stood still for a while. She was almost sober now, so she said slowly, "All right, I'm sorry, Uncle He. Qing drank too much just now. Just treat it as me talking nonsense when I was drunk." Hee-Junyan stood there listening to Gu Xingyin's footsteps slowly walk away. The door closed, and the room returned to silence. He turned his head and looked at the empty room. Suddenly, he walked to the cabinet and picked up the wine that Gu Xingyin had placed on top of it. Without even using a wine glass, he took a big gulp of the wine. She's still young. She doesn't know what love is, and what love is between a man and a woman. Hee-Junyan, she's still young. You're not young anymore. You can't bring her down this path of no return. That night, Hee-Junyan did not sleep at all. Gu Xingyin, who was supposed to be awake the whole night, slept soundly instead. The next day, Hee-Junyan was nowhere to be seen when she went downstairs. Gu Xingyin looked disappointed. She asked the busy person beside her, "Sister May, where did Uncle He go?" Sister May did not know what happened between the two of them, so she replied, "Sir said that there's an important project in the company these few days. It's very urgent. He might have to work overtime, so he might not be back for the next few days." Oh. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. He was hiding from her. Once Hee-Junyan disappeared, he disappeared for a week. He did not appear in front of Gu Xingyin even when she started school. Before Gu Xingyin left, he looked back repeatedly with every step he took, showing his reluctance and grievance vividly. Even Sister May secretly complained that Sir was too much. After all, Miss was about to start school. Even if he took the time to send her off, it would have been nice. However, the truth was, Gu Xingyin asked, "System, how was my performance just now?" The system said, "Very vivid." Gu Xingyin smiled proudly. "That's right. I know him best. He said that he doesn't care about me, but he's probably paying attention to me somewhere now." The system. Sure enough, less than 10 minutes after Gu Xingyin left, Hee-Junyan appeared in front of Sister May. Qing left. Mei Jia nodded and couldn't help but say, "Sir, it would be great if you could come earlier. Miss has been waiting for you for a long time. When I saw her leave, she was very uncomfortable." Hee-Junyan said faintly, "I'm not meeting her now for her own good." Mei Jia was a little baffled when she heard this. Could it be that Miss and Sir had a quarrel? She shook her head. As an employee, it was better for her not to get too involved in the main family's affairs. What's more, Miss and Sir had been together for so many years. She had seen their feelings for each other. How could they be estranged so easily? Just watch, everything will be fine soon. Gu Xingyin was like a fish in water in her new class. She didn't know that her every move was being watched by a certain man. Hee-Junyan looked at the photos. The girl in the photos was smiling like a flower, and was talking intimately with a friend beside her. "You little heartless girl." Hee-Junyan suddenly scolded as he watched. He was glad that Gu Xingyin's mood was not affected by what happened on the night of her birthday, but he also felt a little annoyed because of it. Looking at her, she didn't seem to care about what happened that day at all. As expected, those confessions were just nonsense said when she was drunk. To think that he took it so seriously. He felt an inexplicable sense of annoyance in his heart. Chapter 460. To Gu Xingyin, a month's time wasn't much. After completing so many missions, time didn't mean much to her. But to He Junyan it was different. This was the first time he had been away from Gu Xingyin for so long. Even though he had been paying attention to Gu Xingyin's movements, he couldn't help but wonder if Qingqing was being bullied in a place I can't see. Would she have no one to talk to if she was wronged? Thinking of this, He Junyan wanted to grit his teeth. That heartless brat. It's been so long and he hasn't even called back. Is he really waiting for me, his uncle, to take the initiative to contact him? As a parent with authority, He Junyan would never do something like that. However, on Gu Xingyin's first holiday in high school, she walked out of school with a few friends and immediately saw that familiar car. My family is here to pick me up. I'll get going first. Bye-bye. She happily ran to the car and shouted, "Uncle He." The little girl couldn't hide the surprise on her face. He Junyan reflexively revealed a gentle smile. Then he quickly remembered something and said seriously, "I happen to have something to do near your school today. I remembered that you guys were on holiday, so I came to pick you up." Gu Xingyin snickered in her heart, but on the surface she said knowingly, I know. It's on the way." This man really cared about his face. He Junyan looked at the smile on her face and gritted his teeth. "Let's go. Uncle will take you to eat first." The two of them arrived at one of the more famous restaurants in Jinhua City. He Junyan familiarly ordered Gu Xingyin's favorite dishes. Gu Xingyin propped up her chin and looked at this man without blinking. Sigh, other than being a little slow, this man was perfect in all other aspects. After He Junyan finished ordering, he saw that the little girl opposite him was looking at him. He couldn't help but smile and teased, "What's wrong? It's only been a month and you don't recognize Uncle He anymore?" Gu Xingyin stuck her tongue out mischievously. "I'm just saying that Uncle He is becoming more and more handsome." He Junyan glared at him. "You even dare to tease your uncle? You're really, Mr. He." A pleasantly surprised voice came from behind them. Gu Xingyin looked behind her. It was a woman wearing an off-the-shoulder gown. The fitting cut of the gown accentuated her slender figure. She wore a pair of white high heels on her feet. Her hair was loosely tied up, and she had a generous temperament. She was a very beautiful woman. Gu Xingyin knew who she was. She was one of the many women who liked He Junyan. However, Su Keqing shouldn't have known. She looked at the woman in confusion and asked, "Uncle He, who is this?" He Junyan was at a loss for words. This woman was the daughter of a company in Jinhua City. The company's CEO had always admired He Junyan and had expressed his desire for a marriage alliance many times. However, He Junyan had always rejected him. The last time he was suddenly confessed to by Gu Xingyin, his heart was in a mess. In a daze, he actually thought of finding a woman to try this trick on. Coincidentally, the CEO had suggested that the two of them meet. He didn't refuse. But speaking of which, the two of them had only met once. He Junyan realized that he had no interest in her at all. However, this woman didn't seem to think that way. Chapter 461. Upon hearing Gu Xingyin's words, the woman instinctively looked over. The moment she laid eyes on Gu Xingyin, a trace of shock flashed across her eyes. This girl was so exquisite. Women's innate desire to compare made her unconsciously use her most critical gaze when dealing with outstanding members of the same sex. However, the woman helplessly realized that there was nothing she could find fault with this girl's facial features. Looking at how intimate she was with He Junyan, then looking at her age, the woman quickly realized who she was. She originally wanted to greet Gu Xingyin cordially. After all, it was said that He Junyan doted on this little princess very much. However, He Junyan's words made her dispel that thought. He Junyan said as if he was trying to hide something, "The eldest daughter of the Dingxing Group. I have worked with the CEO of the Dingxing Group before." He didn't even give a basic introduction. When he said this, his eyes were only on the girl opposite him, as if he was afraid that she would misunderstand. The woman suddenly felt unhappy. She felt that their meeting last time had been very pleasant, and there was even a possibility that they could have gone further. She felt that He Junyan was also very satisfied with her, but today, he deliberately distanced himself from her so clearly. There could only be one reason. She looked at Gu Xingyin. She was indeed as pampered as the rumor said. He Junyan was probably afraid that this girl wouldn't be able to accept this at the moment. The woman suddenly laughed. This must be Qingqing. I heard Junyan mention you before. You are indeed a beautiful little princess. I hope that we can get along well in the future. He Junyan frowned when he heard this. When did he and this woman become so close? To the extent that they were calling each other by their names? After all, her father was his senior, so he Junyan restrained himself from embarrassing her. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if Su Keqing didn't think too much. Gu Xingyin decided to throw a little tantrum. Who told you to attract some rotten peach blossoms outside? Her face quickly fell, and she looked straight at He Junyan. Uncle He, what do you mean by getting along well in the future? Are you going to find me an aunt? I don't want it. The young lady's expression was unusually ugly. He Junyan could even see that her eyes were brimming with tears when she asked that question. He Junyan opened his mouth, but the woman beside him had already taken the opportunity to speak. Qingqing, why are you so insensible? Your uncle He is of age, and he lacks someone who understands him well. Besides, you can have one more person who loves you, right? Gu Xingyin's reaction was to get up and run outside. By the time He Junyan reacted, she had already run out. He stood up and was about to chase after her when he saw the woman still standing by the side. Miss Tang, I thought my intentions were clear enough. I don't think the two of us are suitable for each other. I hope you won't say anything that will cause misunderstandings in the future, he said coldly and chased after Gu Xingyin. The woman was left standing there, dumbfounded. After a while, she stomped her feet and left. Gu Xingyin did not run far. When He Junyan ran out, he saw her squatting in a corner. Qingqing. He walked over to her side. The girl stood up, revealing an expressionless face. He Junyan's heart skipped a beat. Qingqing had cried and laughed in front of him before, but she had never shown such a dead expression. Chapter 462. Qingqing, let me explain. He Junyan didn't know why, but when he saw Gu Xingyin like this, he actually panicked. You don't have to explain anything to me, Uncle He. Gu Xingyin raised her head and said seriously, who you want to find and what kind of life you want to live is your own business. It has nothing to do with me. You've taken care of me for so many years in the He family. I'm already indebted to you. If I still want to tell you what to do with your life, I really don't know what's good for me. He Junyan frowned. Qingqing, what are you saying? Gu Xingyin smiled. It's the truth. I won't be willful anymore. I won't get in the way of Uncle He's matters anymore. He Junyan looked at Gu Xingyin, and only felt anger burning in his heart. What did she mean by his life has nothing to do with me? What did she mean by I'm indebted to her for taking care of me? What did she mean by I won't get in the way? This mouth that used to sweetly call him Uncle He. Why would it spit out such heartless and cold words? How could He Junyan allow that? After she filled him with every little detail of his life, how could she act like nothing had happened? How could she just ignore him like that? Your mind is filled with impulsiveness right now. I won't talk to you anymore. Be good, let's go eat. Uncle will take you home after that. Gu Xingyin didn't want him to take her home with him. She had to force this man to see his heart clearly today. Uncle He, I'm no longer a child. I have my own consciousness and the right to choose my life. After I turn 18, I will take back what my parents left me and leave far away. I won't bother you or disturb your life anymore. Without a burden like me, you should be able to. When He Junyan heard the last part, his face darkened. He looked at Gu Xingyin coldly. After you turn 18, take the Su family's assets and leave? Leave far away? He grabbed Gu Xingyin's hand, opened the car door and threw her in. He sat in the driver's seat and drove all the way back to the villa. Sir and Miss, you're back. Sister May greeted them with a smile and saw He Junyan angrily grabbing Gu Xingyin and going upstairs. The door was slammed shut with a bang, causing Sister May to tremble. What was going on? Sir was clearly very happy when he went to pick up Mississippi. Sister May looked worriedly in the direction of the master bedroom on the second floor. Gu Xingyin was flung onto the bed by He Junyan. She could actually empathize with He Junyan now. No matter who it was, If a child that they had painstakingly raised for so many years said such selfish and rude words, they would be furious. Uncle He. She looked uneasily at the man with a terrifying aura in front of her. He Junyan had always been a gentle gentleman in front of Su Keqing. She had never seen such a scary side of He Junyan. He Junyan smiled coldly. Go on, go on. Tell me all your plans for the future and what you want to do with me. If you don't want to have anything to do with me, then tell me all about it. A guilty look flashed across Gu Xingyin's face, but she seemed to have thought of something. She turned her face away stubbornly. That's right. Didn't my existence get in the way of your good fortune? When you get married and have children in the future, I'm afraid you can't wait to get rid of me as a burden. On the other hand, the more she spoke, the more confident she became. Originally, she was extremely guilty, but as she spoke, she began to cry. Chapter 463. He Junyan's anger was mostly dissipated by her cries. But there was still half of it left. He didn't comfort the girl who was crying. He just stood by the side and looked at her coldly. I didn't know that I, He Junyan, had been so devoted to you for so many years just to raise an ingrate like you. Gu Xingyin stared at him with wide eyes and said angrily, I'm not an ingrate. He Junyan said coldly, I raised you for so many years. The first thing you thought of was to leave the He family, and leave me when you came of age. You told me. If that's not an ingrate, then what is? Gu Xingyin widened her eyes. You're the one who despises me for interrupting your life. He Junyan got angry when he heard her say that. He pulled her up from the bed, and they were very close to each other. He gritted his teeth and said, When did I say that you were interrupting my life? When did I despise you? Su Keqing, do you even have a heart? Haven't I treated you well enough? Do you not trust me that much? Gu Xingyin was a little confused. But you don't like me. You'll have to marry a wife and have your own children in the future. Then you won't think that way. I'll meet someone else and spend the rest of my life with him. She couldn't say the rest of her words because He Junyan suddenly bent down and nibbled on her lips. This was the second time He Junyan kissed her, but it was the first time he followed his heart and sucked on this little mouth that kept saying things that he loved and hated. He adopted Su Keqing when he was 23 years old. 5 years had passed, and he had never had a woman by his side. So this was what kissing felt like. He Junyan closed his eyes and tightened his arms around her waist, pulling her closer to him. His tongue pried open Gu Xingyin's lips and teeth, and invited her to indulge in it with him. Gu Xingyin didn't understand why he was suddenly enlightened, but before she could figure it out, she was kissed into a daze by him. She clearly had the memories of every world. So why was this man's kissing technique even more familiar than hers? By the time He Junyan finally let go of her reluctantly, the woman in his arms had a pair of sparkling eyes and her red lips were tender and alluring. Su Keqing, you provoked me first, He Junyan suddenly said. Gu Xingyin seemed to be in a daze as she looked at her blankly. He Junyan's voice sounded like he was gritting his teeth. You made me lose interest in other women. You made me have feelings for the child I raised with my own hands. Su Keqing, I He Junyan admit defeat. Since you have the guts to provoke me, you should be prepared to bear the consequences. Gu Xingyin's face turned red as soon as he heard his words. Uncle He You mean you like me too? By the time she asked the last question, her face was already filled with joy. Su Keqing had been spoiled too much by He Junyan. There was no reason for her to beat around the bush to get what she wanted. He Junyan looked at her excited expression and sighed. She had considered too little. She had dared to confess without hesitation based on her feelings. He only hoped that she wouldn't regret it in the future. He Junyan looked at her seriously. Qingqing, Uncle He will ask you one last time. You are still young. Being with me may not be as wonderful as you think it is. Perhaps you will meet a man who will move your heart even more in the future. If you really decide to be with me, then Uncle He will not give you the chance to regret it. Chapter 464. Gu Xingyin's answer was to tiptoe and kiss him gently on the lips. Although she looked shy, she was more determined and full of admiration for the person in front of her. Uncle He, I know you think I'm young and immature. I can't prove anything to you now. I, Su Keqing, Only know that after my parents left, Uncle he was the person who doted on me the most and treated me the best in the world. He was also the person I liked the most and wanted to be with for the rest of my life. Lee Junyan was moved. Gu Xingyin continued. As for whether I regret it or not, the word regret does not exist in my dictionary. Sister May found that after only one night, the originally stiff atmosphere of the gentleman and the young lady had returned to their former state. No, Sister May felt that the relationship between the two of them was different from before. It seemed that Mr. Lee doted on Miss even more. Although it still felt strange, Sister May was very happy. She had been worried for the whole night, afraid that there would be a gap between Mr. Lee and Mississippi. Sure enough, they had such a good relationship. How could they be estranged? Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief after the two of them talked things out. However, for the two of them who had just established their relationship, the short high school holidays were really short. Uncle He, I can't bear to leave you. Gu Xingyin hugged He Junyan's arm and acted coquettishly. She had to go to school tomorrow. He Junyan pinched her nose. You're acting coquettishly again. You're getting worse. Gu Xingyin giggled. Children who are pampered don't grow up. With Uncle He pampering me, I'm not afraid. She glanced around. Seeing that there was no one around, she quickly stretched her neck and kissed He Junyan on the cheek. He Junyan wanted to chide her, but when he saw her secretly happy and secretive expression, he laughed first. The two of them were so sweet, but they didn't want their actions to be seen by others. Su Qing's eyes widened, and she covered her mouth as she watched this unbelievable scene. So, Su Keqing and her uncle had such a relationship? After the two of them left, Su Qing stood up. The past half a year had been quite miserable for her. Being detained for half a year wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the nightmares that followed him like a shadow. She still couldn't imagine what had happened that night in the factory. She had only wanted to use that rumor to teach Su Keqing a lesson. Who knew that she would attract the real, those things? For this reason, Su Qing even began to believe in Buddhism. Every day before going to bed, she would recite Buddhist scriptures for at least half an hour to calm her mind. Fortunately, after coming out, Su Qing's family had some connections and spent some money to send her to another school. None of the new teachers and classmates knew about her, and they were all very enthusiastic about her. She could be considered to have started a new life. She had thought that she, her previous school, and Su Keqing would no longer have anything to do with her. Who would have thought that she would run into this by chance? Su Qing was a little excited. Many thoughts ran through her mind. Su Keqing's surname was Su, but she clearly called that person Uncle He. She and that man were not uncle and nephew at all. Then, she thought about what she had seen today and the news about students hooking up with rich men that was often reported on the internet. Su Qing felt that she seemed to have discovered something incredible. After all, she had been frightened earlier. Su Qing only secretly remembered this matter in her heart. Once again, she looked in the direction where there was no one, and slowly walked in the opposite direction. Chapter 465. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years had passed. Qingqing, you're going to be an adult soon. He Junyan hugged Gu Xingyin and whispered into her ear. Gu Xingyin could feel the hot breath beside her ear. She understood the meaning behind the man's words. Once she was an adult and fattened up, she would be ready to eat. She didn't find it strange that her lover had needs for her. However, this man was amazing to be able to hold himself back for so long. The 31-year-old man was in the prime of his life. The impulsiveness of his youth had faded away, and his entire person was exuding an elegant charm. Gu Xingyin turned around and sized this man up. He didn't look old. He had changed into casual clothes and appeared on campus. People would even mistake him for a classy senior. What are you looking at? He Junyan saw her staring at him without blinking. Gu Xingyin raised her hand and wrapped it around his neck. She smiled proudly. I'm thinking, how did I manage to ensnare such an outstanding man? I, Su Keqing, am so lucky. She, Gu Xingyin, was also so lucky. He Junyan lowered his head and gazed deeply at her. No, Qingqing, I'm the lucky one to have met you. This silly girl only had eyes for himself. Didn't she realize that as she grew older, her exquisite facial features would fully develop, And there would be more and more gazes on her body? Yes, it must be a gift from the heavens for us to meet. Gu Xingyin meant what he said. The fact that she was created, the fact that she could meet her lover during the mission, and the fact that she could meet him again and again in the reincarnation cycle was really a blessing from the heavens. When it's your coming-of-age ceremony, I'll give you a big present. Gu Xingyin threw herself into his arms and whispered into his ear. He Junyan's eyes were full of smiles. Yes, I'll be waiting for you, Qingqing. Gu Xingyin's birthday was during the holidays after the college entrance exams. They would have a long and sweet vacation. However, there were people who didn't want them to have an easy time. A week before the college entrance examination, a large number of anonymous posts appeared on the school forum. The contents of the posts were all the same. A certain tall, long-legged, fair-skinned, beautiful young lady from a good family background was actually a fake young lady. She had no blood relations with the wealthy bachelor from Jinhua City, who was said to be her guardian. The post didn't say anything about the girl, but it just so happened that it attracted people's attention. She had fair skin, a beautiful face and a good family background. She even had a close guardian. The only thing missing from the post was Gu Xingyin's name. Regardless of whether this post was true or not, if it was really an 18-year-old girl who was facing the college entrance examination, she would definitely be in a terrible fix because of this. It would definitely have a huge impact on her future exams. The sinister intentions of the person behind this were obvious. Is it Su Qing? The first person that came to Gu Xingyin's mind was Su Qing. After all, as Su Keqing, she had been staying in school for the past few years and had no enemies at all. The only person who could have a grudge against her was Su Qing. Moreover, Gu Xingyin had learned from the system that Su Qing knew about her relationship with He Junyan. The system denied it this time. It's not Su Qing. The person behind this was beyond Gu Xingyin's expectations. It was actually the young lady from a certain corporation whom she had only met once and had never heard of again. Chapter 466. Gu Xingyin checked and found out that the woman had no evidence at all when she posted the post. She said that the two of them had an unusual relationship, but she was just spouting nonsense. Her goal was to disgust Gu Xingyin and make her fail the college entrance examination. Gu Xingyin was silent for a while after she found out. Then she said to the system, I remember that I only met her once, right? The system nodded. Yes, the only time we met was 3 years ago, and we didn't get along. Gu Xingyin couldn't believe it. So she has been holding a grudge against me until now? And she wants to ruin me during the college entrance exam? After she said this, she laughed to herself. She carefully sorted out her thoughts and helplessly found that the unhappiness between the two of them seemed to be caused by a certain man. She clicked on the forum again, and found that it was indeed exploding. Mengming de Li Zi. No way, I see her usually delicate appearance. She's actually that kind of person. She's really good at pretending. Qiangwei Huazue. Don't talk nonsense if you don't know. I've been classmates with her for 6 years. Look at her temperament and upbringing. She's originally a pampered young lady. Only she knows the intentions of the person who posted this. Guyumka. I agree with the person above. Temperament can't lie. Huahua. Hehe, there's a bunch of people above. Don't tell me they're the water army sent by someone? Filthy Li Wuxin. I'm just a bystander who doesn't know the truth. Please tell me, who is this post talking about? Gu Xingyin casually glanced at the posts. There were all kinds of people who were watching a show and mocking her. However, most of them were just passing by. After all, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this post was fake. She sorted out her thoughts, and was about to reply when she suddenly saw an anonymous post. Unlike the previous posts that blindly slandered her, this post was very detailed. From the girl's family to her relationship with her so-called guardian, their daily intimate interactions, and so on. In the end, the poster even said that she had seen the girl kissing her so-called guardian with her own eyes. The poster even attached a photo. There was no clear face in it, but most people who were familiar with her could still recognize her. When this post came out, it really caused an uproar in the forum. Unlike the groundless accusations above, this post was completely based on facts, And the key point was that she had a picture of herself. Sister likes to eat meat. F***ck, I was so sure that everything was fake. So there's a big move behind the scenes? Sue. That's impossible. She's definitely not someone who's anonymous. If you have the guts, come out openly. What's the point of hiding and slandering others? Blurry Rabbit. Mummy, the water in school is so deep. I want to go home. When Gu Xingyin saw this post, he deleted the reply that he was editing. Different opponents should have different ways of responding. That's right. The second anonymous post was posted by Su Qing. After all, she had stayed in the junior high school for a few years. Of course, she paid attention to the forum. When she accidentally opened it today and saw the full screen of posts, she could tell at a glance that the person in the post was Su Keqing. Chapter 467. She had always kept in mind what she had seen a few years ago. But the haunted factory had really scared her. She didn't know why, but Su Qing felt that nothing good would happen to her whenever she met Su Keqing. So, she had always buried that incident in her heart until she saw this post today. Su Qing thought that this was a gift from God for her to take revenge on Su Keqing. There were so many posts on the forum. If she secretly attached one of them, she would definitely not be discovered. If Su Keqing wanted to investigate, the first person she would find would be the person who started the post. Moreover, Su Qing and Su Keqing had not interacted for 3 years. Su Keqing would definitely not think of her. Unfortunately, her idea was good, but she didn't know that Gu Xingyin had the system. The other person who posted the post looked at Su Qing's anonymous post and turned pale. Lei Tingting didn't expect that she would hit the nail on the head. She just wanted to teach Su Keqing a lesson to vent her anger from being humiliated that year. She felt disgusted at the thought of He Junyan having that kind of relationship with the adopted Su Keqing. On the other hand, she looked at the post happily. Su Keqing, let's see if you can still focus on your college entrance exams after such a big thing happened. Many people who guessed the identity of the person in the post were waiting for Gu Xingyin to respond. Unfortunately, they were disappointed. Gu Xingyin acted as if she didn't see the post. She ate her meals and studied as usual. She didn't seem to be affected at all. Could it be that she didn't know about this at all? Those who knew her wanted to tell her, but how could they say it? There were a few popular posts on the forum, and the main character seemed to be you? She didn't even mention a name. Moreover, the school was full of students. Most of them had pure minds. They felt that it was a good thing that Gu Xingyin didn't know about this. At least her mood wouldn't be affected, and she wouldn't fail the college entrance exams. Thus, while Su Qing and Lei Tingting were waiting anxiously, Gu Xingyin calmly finished her college entrance exams. She wasn't affected at all. When Gu Xingyin finally coincidentally found out about this matter, the popularity had almost died down, and most people were focusing on the results. That's how humans are. If it's something that has nothing to do with me, I'll just watch the show when I'm interested. After that, I'll do whatever I want. It has nothing to do with me. At this moment, He Junyan also found out about the school forum. Why didn't you tell me? He bit her lips as if punishing her. Gu Xingyin looked at him angrily, as if she was dissatisfied with his behavior. After hearing his words, she casually said, "It's not a big deal. Besides, the post is right. You and I have that kind of relationship." He Junyan's expression was serious. Of course it's different. You and I are in love with each other, and we are in a serious relationship. You, Su Keqing, are the eldest daughter of the Su family with a net worth of hundreds of millions. Although I, He Junyan, have a modest net worth, I can't afford to keep you as a mistress. How could he allow someone to tarnish the reputation of the girl he treated like a treasure? Gu Xingyin burst out laughing. She really didn't care about this. That night, a certain school forum was attacked by an unknown hacker. All the posts were deleted, and the entire forum was wiped clean. Because Gu Xingyin's incident had happened a long time ago, and the hacker's attack was large-scale, no one connected it to her. Just like that, this matter sank to the bottom of the ocean. Chapter 468. Gu Xingyin's coming-of-age ceremony at the age of 18 was very grand. Hee Junyan had put in a lot of effort to give her a perfect birthday party. He wanted everything to be the best. Today, in front of all the guests, I, Hee Junyan, as Miss Su Keqing's guardian, will return everything that belongs to Miss Su Keqing in perfect condition under everyone's witness, Hee Junyan said after his speech. Many of the people present had already understood what he meant. Most of the people present knew Su Keqing's identity. Many of them were even good friends of Su Keqing's parents. These people were very gratified by Hee Junyan's actions. However, there were some people who had other intentions who were truly surprised. They had previously discussed in private that the Su couple had entrusted their daughter and their family assets to someone else. It was no different from sending a piece of delicious meat to the mouth of a wild beast for him to keep. Most likely it would be a one-way trip. They didn't expect Hee Junyan to be such a gentleman. Hee Junyan had a lawyer behind him. He signed a thick stack of documents and handed them to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin looked through them carefully one by one and signed her name. She could have chosen not to look at them, and chosen to believe Hee Junyan. However, she saw how serious this man was. If she really did that, she wouldn't be trusting this man. Instead, she would be letting down his painstaking efforts. Hee Junyan had purposely handed over the Su family's assets to her in front of all the business leaders in Jinhua City. This was to tell everyone that the real head of the Su family was back. Of course, Gu Xingyin couldn't treat this lightly. However, there was more than one unexpected thing that happened today. After Gu Xingyin signed the documents, all the guests stood up and applauded. Suddenly, the lights in the hall dimmed. The light pink lights looked especially dreamy in such an environment. Just as everyone was wondering what had happened, Hee Junyan suddenly took out a small box from his pocket. Gu Xingyin instantly understood what he was going to do. Although they had been married for a long time, she couldn't help but cover her mouth in surprise. In front of everyone, Hee Junyan knelt down on one knee before Gu Xingyin and opened the gift box in his hand. An exquisite diamond ring shone brilliantly under the light. Today, in front of all the guests, I have an even more important matter that I have yet to mention. He looked at Gu Xingyin seriously, his eyes full of affection. Qingqing, will you marry me? Ah! Some of the women couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone was stunned by this turn of events. What kind of development was this? If they didn't hear wrongly, President He was Miss Su's guardian, right? Those conspiracy theorists thought that they instantly understood what Hee Junyan was thinking. So that was the case. No wonder he handed over the Su Group's shares so readily. It turned out that he had a backup plan. Brilliant, truly brilliant. Even the eldest daughter of the Su family had become Hee Junyan's. Would the Su family be far away? Gu Xingyin and Hee Junyan couldn't care less about what other people thought. At this moment, they only had each other in their eyes. Gu Xingyin couldn't stop smiling as she extended her hand to Hee Junyan. I'm willing. How romantic. A girl shouted excitedly and took the lead in clapping her hands. The guests snapped back to their senses. No matter what they were thinking, they all smiled and gave their blessings to the couple. Chapter 469. Hee Junyan looked at her insincere expression and smiled. Gu Xingyin saw that he was neatly dressed in his home clothes, and that there was a book on the bedside table. She knew that he was just teasing her. She immediately changed her expression. She frowned and tears welled up in her eyes. This change shocked Hee Junyan. He knew in his heart that Gu Xingyin was most likely faking it, but he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He bent down and asked, "What's wrong, Qingqing?" Gu Xingyin's eyes were teary. "It hurts." Guilt flashed across Hee Junyan's eyes. He knew that he had lost control last night. The girl in front of him was still very inexperienced. Unfortunately, the self-control that he was so proud of was nothing in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin enjoyed the treatment of a queen. She washed up and dressed while Hee Junyan waited on her without complaint. After everything was done, she said coquettishly, "I'm so tired. I don't want to move." Hee Junyan didn't say another word and carried her down the stairs. He faced Sister May, who had just entered the room. Sister May had seen Hee Junyan propose to Gu Xingyin with her own eyes last night. At that time, she was really shocked. However, after one night, she thought it through. Anyway, Sir and Miss weren't related by blood. The two of them had always been so close. If they didn't get together like this, when Sir got married in the future, the bride might not be able to accept it. After all, she had watched Gu Xingyin grow up. Sister May naturally felt sorry for her more than others. She accepted this kind of thing without any hesitation. Now that she saw He Junyan carrying Gu Xingyin down the stairs, Sister May was experienced. How could she not know what had happened between the two of them? Sir was too anxious. Miss had just turned 18. Sister May gave He Junyan a reproachful look. He Junyan took the blame with a bitter smile. Who would have thought that it was actually the obedient girl in his arms who had seduced him last night? However, looking at the two of them now, no one would believe it. President He just accept it. Gu Xingyin saw that Sister May did not show any difference, and she was happy in her heart. Although in the mission world, the only person she really cares about is her lover, Sister May has taken care of her for so many years. It is also a happy thing to be able to get her blessing. The two of them finished their breakfast sweetly. Anyone who saw them would feel their teeth ache. Sister May had already left the restaurant tactfully. When she left, she still had a gratified look on her face. The more Sir dotes on Miss know she will soon be madam, the more relieved she felt. Gu Xingyin's college entrance examination results were released. Unsurprisingly, she ranked first. With her grades, she could get into any school in the country. However, under He Junyan's strong request, she still chose to study finance at a university in Jinhua City. One of them was close to home, and the two of them were at the peak of their love, so they couldn't bear to part. The other reason was that this school's finance major was one of the top in the country. It was not a disgrace to Gu Xingyin's grades. Everything went smoothly. The only accident happened when Gu Xingyin was in her third year of university. She found out that she was pregnant. Hence, the wedding that was originally planned after graduation was brought forward. For the first time, Gu Xingyin experienced what it felt like to get married with a baby. Chapter 470. Fortunately, He Junyan was fast enough to prevent her from holding a wedding while pregnant. Gu Xingyin took a leave of absence from school and stayed at home to be her fragile object. She was treated like a treasure by the overly nervous He Junyan and Sister May every day. How was Su Qing doing at this time? She had taken a year off from school because she was detained, so she was 1 year younger than Gu Xingyin and the rest. Gu Xingyin didn't forget the kindness of the foreign posts back then. She didn't repay it then because it wasn't the right time. The second year after Gu Xingyin's college entrance examination, which was also the year of Su Qing's college entrance examination. A week before the college entrance examination, Su Qing's school forum was flooded with posts. There was only one content. Su Qing from grade 12 class 1 had been detained for half a year for deliberately murdering a classmate. In just one night, Su Qing's life had undergone an earth-shattering change. Her boyfriend of a year broke up with her, because he couldn't accept that his other half was a vicious girl. Whether walking on the streets or in school, people were pointing at her, their eyes full of surprise, disdain, and even fear. Her father's promotion was also blown. The originally foolproof transfer was suddenly removed because her father had raised a daughter who had been in prison, and the higher-ups doubted his ability. However, no matter how hard she tried, no one could find out who posted these posts, even if they were extremely skilled hackers. What followed was a night of nightmares. Su Qing seemed to have returned to those days. She didn't dare to close her eyes at all. Once she did, those things would follow her like a shadow, making her unable to sleep every night. She didn't sleep well for a whole week. In such a state, her college entrance examination results were imaginable. It was a mess. Su Qing almost went crazy. In the end, she went to a third-rate school. What Gu Xingyin had done was just to return what she had done to him in its entirety. Their lives were destined to never cross again in the future. As for Ms. Lei Tingting, Gu Xingyin also sent a small gift. On the eve of her engagement, Ms. Lei Tingting's fiancé received an anonymous email. In those photos, Lei Tingting, the noble and generous young lady, was participating in various parties abroad. Those gatherings were very messy. Striptease and one-night stands were all child's play. There were even s. Gu Xingyin was not in the mood to pay attention to what happened next. He only knew that Lei Tingting's fiancé broke off the engagement with her. Although the photos were not released to the public for the sake of the two families, Leitingting's reputation was spread among the upper class. At the very least, no other young master would dare to marry such a woman. During the first snowfall of winter, Gu Xingyin gave birth to a daughter safely in the hospital. He Junyan was a man in his 30s. He was so happy that he almost cried as he held the baby in his arms. Qing, look, this is our little baby. He sat beside Gu Xingyin and looked at the woman and the baby. His wife was sleeping peacefully on the bed, a satisfied and happy smile on her tired face. Beside her was the baby, who was sleeping soundly with her fingers sucked. He was at peace and leaned over to plant a kiss on each of their faces. These were the two most important women in his life. Chapter 471. This was an extremely beautiful place. Every green leaf seemed to twinkle with a lustrous light, and every flower was always in its most blossoming state. This was the pure land of the fantasy continent, the place where the elves resided, Starlight Forest. There was a person lying on a swing made of intertwined starlight flowers, taking a nap. Her long, snow-white skirt extended from the swing and fell to the ground. If one looked closely, the skirt was embroidered with countless starlight flowers using silver thread. When the wind blew, it was as if endless starlight was falling. Looking up, the first thing that came into view was a head of light green hair that was lazily scattered. The top of her head was bound by a gorgeous and exquisite starlight flower crown. When one looked up, it was as if even the wind had stopped breathing. This was an indescribably beautiful face. It was a beauty that even the poets of the magical continent couldn't describe with words of praise. It was a charm that the sculptors couldn't capture no matter how meticulous they were. Suddenly, those long eyelashes trembled slightly, and the owner sitting on the swing slowly opened her eyes. At this moment, the plants around her seemed to have sensed something and instantly bloomed enthusiastically. "Your Majesty, you're awake? Your Majesty, your Majesty." What a pair of beautiful eyes they were! The light green pupils were like the clearest and most flawless jade pools, containing endless vitality and vitality. The owner of those eyes was the ruler of the fantasy continent's Starlight Forest, the Queen of the Elves, Helena. Gu Xingyin gently raised her hand with a smile, and a light green halo rose from her palm. Then, it turned into specks of starlight that fell on the surrounding plants. Those plants that had received the gift of nature magic from the Elven Queen bowed to Gu Xingyin in gratitude. Gu Xingyin sorted out the memories that the system had just transmitted to her. Elven Queen Helena, the first elf born from the Elven Mother Tree, the sacred object of the elves. She was born in her adult form, and was the most powerful guardian of the Starlight Forest. She was also one of the top powerhouses in the entire fantasy continent. She was the queen of the Elven clan, who had incomparably powerful battle prowess. She was also recognized as the #1 beauty in the entire fantasy continent. However, such a powerful and beautiful elf queen was only a character that made people sigh with regret in a certain story. That story, to put it simply, was about a human girl who carried the protagonist aura. She had good luck all the way and activated countless cheats. In the end, she became a supreme master and had countless harems. In the process of her killing spree, one of her lovers was poisoned by the fire poison of Hell's lava. In the entire fantasy continent, only the Elven race's holy tree, the Elven Mother Tree, could cure her. In order to save her lover, she transformed herself and sneaked into the Starlight Forest. She got close to the youngest elder of the elf clan, Alan, and sneaked into the elf sacred ground. In the end, she disappeared with the elf sacred tree. She had left, but the entire elf clan had fallen into a great calamity. Alan knew that he had made a big mistake, and was filled with remorse. He committed suicide in front of all the elves to apologize. The root of the elf clan was the Elven Mother Tree. Without the Elven Mother Tree, the entire Starlight Forest withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The elves also began to show different degrees of weakness and aging. The entire elf clan was in imminent danger. At this time, as the Elven Queen, Helena made a huge decision for the entire elf clan. Chapter 472. The Elven Queen was born from the Elven Mother Tree after countless years of nurturing. She was the first elf between heaven and earth. As long as the fantasy magic continent was not destroyed, she would be an immortal existence. In a sense, she could replace the elven mother tree. Therefore, after Helena studied countless elven magic books, she prayed to the goddess of nature in the elven Holy Land and sacrificed herself to become the new elven mother tree. She saved the entire elven race and even the entire Starlight Forest, but gave up on herself. Gu Xingyin finished sorting out the plot and sighed to herself. In the original plot, the elven race did not have a good ending. Because of the elven queen, the entire elven race hated that human girl, and even started a war that spread across the entire continent. However, no matter how strong the elven race was, they could not defeat someone with a protagonist aura. In the end, the entire elven race suffered heavy losses and had to seal the Starlight Forest to recover. When Gu Xingyin came to the elven queen, there were still 1,000 years before the birth of the protagonist aura girl, Lily. System, she has the protagonist aura. Isn't she the protagonist of this world? Gu Xingyin asked with some doubt. The system's calm voice was somewhat disdainful. How could she be considered a protagonist? She just happened to obtain something that could forcefully steal the luck of others to replenish herself. That's why she was so lucky. Host, haven't you noticed that everyone who went against her ended up very miserably? That's because their luck was all stolen by her. The true children of fate are loved by the laws of the world. For example, the elven queen that host lives in will not bring misfortune to others. On the contrary, the true protagonists will even benefit the people around them. Gu Xingyin nodded to express her understanding. Your Majesty, a new elf is about to be born in the Holy Land. A live female elf reported to Gu Xingyin with a smile. Gu Xingyin's expression froze. Calculating the time, Aliner, who was deceived by Lily and ended up committing suicide, was born at this time. A smile appeared on her face. I'll go take a look. Our elf is finally coming out. Aliner's birth received the attention of the entire elven race, because he was the second elf after Queen Helena to be born after 10,000 years of nurturing by the mother tree. All elves guessed that after he was born, he would definitely be an extremely powerful elf. When Gu Xingyin arrived at the elven sacred land, many elves who had heard about the elven mother tree's movements had already rushed over. Upon seeing Gu Xingyin, the elves all bowed to her. Queen, Your Majesty. Gu Xingyin nodded and walked to the front to look at the holy tree of the elves. Elves were born from the elven mother tree, and the potential of newborn elves was judged based on the length of time they were born. Elves were elves birth elves for ages for nurture? Of course, as the first elf in the fantasy continent, no one knew how long Gu Xingyin had been nurtured by the mother tree of the fairies. This little elf that had been nurtured for 10,000 years naturally received the blessings of all elves. The green radiance that had been lingering around the mother elven tree suddenly became unprecedentedly dazzling. The branches and leaves on her body gently trembled. On one of the branches, a huge flower bud slowly detached from the tree and fell to the ground. Chapter 473. The moment it landed on the ground, the flower bud suddenly bloomed. A green-haired elf the size of an adult's palm was curled up inside. He seemed to have woken up from his sleep. His eyelashes trembled slightly, and he slowly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, his small body began to grow. In the blink of an eye, he had the appearance of a normal human child of about 10 years old. The flower bud on the ground also turned into a light green robe, which he wore on his body. The first thing that this little young elf saw was the elven queen, who was standing closest to him. A sense of familiarity that seemed to come from the depths of his soul made him instinctively walk towards Gu Xingyin. Then he gently pulled on her sleeve. Looking at the undisguised joy and admiration in the elf's eyes, Gu Xingyin could not help but smile. Elves loved all beautiful things. This elf was only 10 years old, but he had already shown an unparalleled beauty. It was simply irresistible to the elves. She squatted down so that she was at the same level as the elf. What is your name? The elf looked at Gu Xingyin without blinking. He replied, Aliner. Every elf would be given a name by the elven mother tree when they were born. That was why Gu Xingyin asked Aliner directly. The surrounding elves began to spontaneously sing praises. Every time a little elf was born, they would be grateful. This was because this was the best gift that the goddess of nature and the elven mother tree had given to the elves. After the praises were sung, all the elves looked at Alinor with joy and anticipation. Gu Xingyin knew what they meant. Elves were not born naturally. Newly born little elves were the most popular treasures in the elves. According to convention, little elves could choose an elf to be their parent before they reached adulthood. She squatted down and smiled gently at Alinor. Look, there are so many elves. You can choose a guide. He will be responsible for teaching you everything you need in the future, before you reach adulthood. After saying this, she walked to the side and waited for the elves to show themselves. A slender male elf walked up to Alan and proudly said, "I am the best archer of the elves. If I become your guide, I will train you to be even better than me." Little Ellen shook her head, and the male elf left with a look of disappointment. An elf with a gentle face and wise eyes walked over. He smiled at Alinor and said, "I am the elven elder in charge of the library. I can teach you the most profound knowledge." Little Alan still shook his head. The elf smiled helplessly and walked to the side. Another female elf with exquisite looks walked over, her eyes shining as she looked at Alan. "I'm the elf with the best zither skills. I can let you feel the charm of the most beautiful music." Little Alan looked at her and didn't say anything. The female elf obviously liked the little elf very much and left with a sad face. Many elves who wanted to raise elves introduced themselves to Alinor, but little Alinor didn't show any intention to follow him. Even Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. She remembered that in the original plot, little Alinor chose the knowledgeable elder. This time, it seemed like something was wrong. Chapter 474. Gu Xingyin walked to Alan's side and said seriously, "Alan, you need a guide to guide you until you reach adulthood." The little Alan looked at all the elves and pulled on her sleeve without saying a word. He said in a clear voice, "I want Her Majesty." The surrounding elves were in an uproar. For so many years, the elven queen had a natural temperament that made all the elves submit to her. Thus, no elf had ever chosen the queen as their guide. Alan was not afraid of the queen's aura at all. All the elves looked at Gu Xingyin and waited for her reaction. "I wonder if Her Majesty the Queen is willing to be little Allenby's guide?" Thinking of the queen holding little Alan's hand, and the two of them were so beautiful. Many of the elves had a dreamy expression just by imagining it. Gu Xingyin hesitated for a moment. In the original plot, Helena didn't guide any of the elves, but Alan chose to guide himself this time. Thinking of Alan's ending after he reached adulthood, Gu Xingyin suddenly felt that there was nothing wrong with her teaching him personally. Alan was the most talented elf in the past 10,000 years. Otherwise, he would not have become one of the 10 great elven elders as soon as he reached adulthood. In the original plot, Alan had been living in the Starlight Forest since he was born. He had never seen the outside world. That was why he was attracted by She Lily's uniqueness after she appeared and fell into her trap. In the end, he caused the elves to be in trouble and committed suicide out of guilt. At the end of the day, he was just a naive and innocent elf. Gu Xingyin looked down at Alan, who was staring at him nervously. Alan's hands were tightly gripping his sleeves, and his face was full of anticipation. His big, light green eyes were filled with her own reflection. Gu Xingyin's heart suddenly softened. She bent down and gently picked him up. "What a clever little fellow. All right, as you wish. I, Helena, in the name of the Elven Queen, hereby announce that before you reach adulthood, I will be your guardian and guide until you can shoulder the glory of the elves on your shoulders." Alan's eyes suddenly burst with joy. He bent his eyes and smiled. He quickly leaned over and kissed Gu Xingyin's face. Then, with a move of his hand, a faint light lit up, and a beautiful wreath appeared in his little hand. "Your Majesty." The little Alan put the wreath in front of Gu Xingyin with a shy face. "This is my gift to your Majesty. I hope you like it." His action surprised the surrounding elves and Gu Xingyin. He was just born without anyone's guidance. He could use natural magic without a teacher. Although it was only a low-level magic, this talent was amazing. His first magic was to make a wreath for the queen. Gu Xingyin only felt a tingling feeling in her heart. The starlight wreath in her hair suddenly disappeared. She gently lowered her head and signaled Alan to put it on for her. Such a cute and lovable child. She must protect him in the future. Allenby excitedly placed the crown he had made on her head carefully. His eyes seemed to be glowing as he looked at the queen. Chapter 475. Allenby, this is your palace. Gu Xingyin pointed at the room that had been tidied up for him. Her other hand was still holding little Alan Nur. Gu Xingyin had never seen such a spoiled child. He seemed to be very greedy for her arms. Ever since she held him in her arms, he was unwilling to come down. After all, he was born an elf, not a real child. He could see that this beautiful woman loved and indulged him. He was obviously using this to act spoiled. As long as he opened his eyes wide and looked at the queen without blinking, the queen seemed to be able to compromise on anything. Little Alan came to this conclusion. He did not hide his thoughts, and Gu Xingyin could easily see through him. However, Alan had the biggest advantage, appearance and age. Even though Gu Xingyin knew that he was just using his face to act cute, he couldn't bear to reject him. He was such a cunning little guy. How could he be so easily deceived by that human girl? Gu Xingyin thought in melancholy. Your Majesty, can I not stay here? Alan asked softly. Then where does Alan want to live? Gu Xingyin asked with interest. Alan looked excited. I want to live with your Majesty. Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, the head maid behind her smiled and said, Your Highness, this is not in accordance with the rules. As Ali Nur's guide was the queen, they naturally addressed him as Your Highness. Little Alan pursed his lips and looked at her, but he still looked at Gu Xingyin. He knew who the real master was. As long as the queen was willing, any rules were fleeting. Gu Xingyin saw through his thoughts. She looked at Alan, who was looking at her expectantly, and smiled. Then she shook her head in front of Alan's surprised gaze. You can't, Alan. Our Alan is going to be a hero in the future. How can he be afraid of living alone? She calmly looked at the child in her arms. Sure enough, after hearing her words, little Ellen's beautiful face scrunched up, as if she was very distressed. After a long while he reluctantly said, All right, then I won't live with you, Your Majesty. I want to become the strongest warrior of the elven race, and protect Your Majesty. I won't be afraid. Gu Xingyin held back her laughter and nodded, praising him. Yes, our Alan is the bravest. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief when he finally got rid of the troublesome little fellow and excitedly went to patrol his territory. When she returned to her palace, a maid delivered a gorgeous envelope to her. Looking at the glittering gold, Gu Xingyin didn't need to read the contents to know that it was sent by the dragons who loved gold. Sure enough, the owner of the envelope was the Golden Dragon King, who lived in the distant Dragon Valley in the north. This letter was to inform the Elven Queen that the time for the multi-race alliance had arrived, and to ask her to attend on time. The alliance of many races was formed 10,000 years ago, when the dark races were wreaking havoc. The beast race, the elven race, and the human race were the leaders of the three major races on the fantasy continent. They joined forces with the other races of various sizes to fight against the dark races. Later, the dark races were eliminated, but the multi-race alliance was kept, and the leaders of each race gathered once every 1,000 years. Chapter 476. Gu Xingyin chose 100 warriors from the elves to follow her to the Dragon's Valley in the north. Alinar knew this news and asked to go with them. This time Gu Xingyin, who had always been obedient to him, rejected him mercilessly. No, the underage elves can't leave the Starlight Forest. Alinar looked at the queen. Her gentle eyes were firm without hesitation. He knew that this time he could only be obedient. Then Your Majesty must come back soon. Alinar will miss you very much, he said in a low voice. Gu Xingyin smiled and used nature magic to condense a beautiful starlight flower, and handed it to Alinar. This flower is for my little Alinar. When its petals fully bloom, I will come back. Alinar solemnly took the budding starlight flower, and nodded heavily. I will sing for her every day, and let her bask in the sun. This way she can bloom earlier. Gu Xingyin smiled. He was a child after all. This kind of flower made with magic, how could it be the same as a natural flower? But it was good to give him something to think about. Alinar stood in the middle of many elves, watching the queen leave the starlight forest with her people. When the long line could no longer be seen, he touched the starlight flower in his hand and said, "It has to bloom quickly. This way Her Majesty can come back soon." The starlight forest was located in the south of the magic continent. In order to go to the Dragon's Valley, the elves had to cross almost the entire magic continent. The elves liked nature and were not used to interacting with humans. Most of them walked through deserted forests or canyons. Occasionally, they would meet a few adventurers, and the other party would even think that they were hallucinating. Or they recognized Gu Xingyin's unique mount, the Moonlight Unicorn, and excitedly wanted to get close, but in the blink of an eye, they would lose track of the elves. They moved forward in a low profile, but added a few more mysterious legends to the magic continent. The news of the number one beauty of the continent, the Elven Queen, appearing in the human world slowly spread. After half a year of travel, Gu Xingyin finally arrived at the Dragon's Valley with her elves. Different from the exquisite beauty of Starlight Forest, Dragon's Valley was filled with an imposing and rough style. Many elves frowned. Everyone on the fantasy magic continent knew that the elves and dragons were at loggerheads with one another. The former despised the latter for having poor aesthetic standards, being rude and not knowing etiquette. The latter couldn't stand the former's pretentious, arrogant, and condescending attitude. However, no matter how much both sides hated each other, when Gu Xingyin personally arrived at Dragon's Valley, she was still greeted with the highest standard by the dragons. According to the words of the dragons, although the elves were stingy, arrogant, and fussy, their beauty was undeniable. This was especially true for Her Majesty the Queen. He was willing to save up some gold just to meet her. One could imagine how popular the Elven Queen was among the dragons to be able to make the dragons, who valued wealth as much as their lives, say such words. This was one of the main reasons why the elves hated dragons. The elves entered the Dragon's Valley under the baptism of countless gazes. The master of the Dragon's Valley, the leader of the dragons, Golden Dragon Beemans, quickly rushed over after hearing the news. Actually, there was another important reason why Gu Xingyin came here this time. According to the past, his lover was likely to be either the human emperor or the behemoth. Chapter 477. However, Gu Xingyin looked away in disappointment as soon as she saw Beemans. It wasn't him. Although Beemans, who had brilliant blonde hair, a perfectly proportioned body, and a handsome face, was very attractive in Gu Xingyin's eyes, everyone was the same as long as they were not his lovers. Beeman's eyes lit up the moment he saw Gu Xingyin. The entire continent knew that the dragons were promiscuous. The Golden Dragon King had always had some inexplicable feelings for the number one beauty of the fantasy continent, but it was just a one-sided love. If the Elven Queen really liked him, the two of them would have known each other for tens of thousands of years. They wouldn't just be acquaintances. Seeing Gu Xingyin's indifferent expression toward him, Beemans lowered his eyes in disappointment. However, he quickly pulled himself together again. Helena had always been like this. She was gentle to everyone, but she wasn't close to anyone. He had an endless lifespan, which meant that he had unlimited possibilities, wasn't it? The elves were the race furthest away from the Dragon Valley. When the elves arrived, almost all the other races had already arrived, except for the humans. In recent years, the relationship between the humans, who dominated the fantasy continent, and the other races had been getting worse and worse. The reason was that the humans were reproducing at a terrifying rate. The more people there were, the more land and resources they needed. This would inevitably affect the interests of the other races. The powerful races like the dragons and elves were still fine. However, the weaker races like the dwarves were even driven away from their own land by the humans, and became homeless wanderers. The human emperor was heartless. As the supreme ruler of the human race, his attitude determined everything. The human emissary arrived late under everyone's expectations. However, the human emperor didn't show up. It was said that it was his 30th generation direct descendant who came. That human prince was very arrogant. As a junior, he also bowed to the leaders of the other races after arriving. He was about to sit down on the seat of the human leader. Then he was thrown to the ground by a strong force. A gentle and pleasant voice that he had never heard before sounded in his ears. Who do you think you are? How dare you sit on the same level as me? Beemans retracted his right hand and looked at Gu Xingyin with a smile. Although the elf clan was gentle, they were also famous for their arrogance. Even the human sovereign Wu Xian did not dare to be so presumptuous in front of the elf queen. This junior, who came from nowhere, actually dared to humiliate them so blatantly. It could be said that the newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. The human prince was furious at being treated in such a manner. He was about to open his mouth and curse when he saw Gu Xingyin. However, he lost his voice the moment he saw her. He had seen countless beauties, but none of the beauties he had seen in his life could compare to the beauty in front of him. The other party simply sat there and looked at him with a pair of light green eyes. His gaze could be considered gentle, but it made him feel a bone-piercing chill. He knew who this person was. To be able to sit in the most honorable position, to have light green hair and eyes, and to have such a peerless beauty, the elf queen. He was chosen to participate in the multi-race alliance. Of course, he wasn't just a piece of trash. On the contrary, his previous appearance was deliberate. Over the years, the human race had become more and more arrogant in the magic fantasy continent. These other races did not make any big moves. This time, he wanted to test where their bottom line was. However, he didn't expect to kick an iron plate as soon as he arrived. Chapter 478. Who was the Elven Queen? No matter how arrogant this human prince was, he knew that she was one of the most untouchable existences in the entire Fantasia continent, just like his own royal family's ancestors. Gu Xingyin glanced at him indifferently. He closed his eyes and said softly, "Wuxin, Beemans and I aren't worthy enough for you to lower yourself and come here for a chat?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it seemed to have been strengthened layer by layer. Gradually, it resounded throughout the entire Fantasia continent. When everyone heard this, they were also shocked by the meaning of these words. Wuxin? In the entire Fantasia continent, there was only one person who dared to use this name. The Supreme Emperor of the human race. The name Beemans could only be used with Wuxin by the legendary Golden Dragon King. Then the person who dared to call them by their names. In the entire Fantasia continent, there was only one person left. The ordinary crowd was excited to watch the show, but some powerhouses who had reached a certain level were worried and frowning. The message conveyed by this was not good. In the distant Starlight Forest, little Alan also heard Gu Xingyin's words. He was learning nature magic from the Elven Elder. Ever since the Elven Elder was ordered to teach this little prince, he had never stopped marveling in his heart. He only needed to learn any magic spell once, and he could use it without any mistakes. He had never seen such a talented elf. Perhaps Her Majesty the Queen's talent was as good or even better. But Her Majesty the Queen was the first elf, and she was born in her adult form. No one could answer this question. Elderly Sansi, it's Her Majesty the Queen's voice. Alan stopped what he was doing and said happily. When he said this, he subconsciously looked at the starlight flower he put aside. It had not bloomed yet. Elderly Sansi was one of the oldest elves. He was a little worried, but he smiled and said, "Yes, it's Her Majesty the Queen's voice magic." Her Majesty the Queen doesn't seem very happy. Alan wrinkled his little face. Li Sansi was surprised by the child's sensitivity, but he comforted him with a smile. Her Majesty the Queen is so powerful, what could she be unhappy about? Little Allenby, study hard and give Her Majesty a surprise when she returns. Alan nodded when he heard this. Elderly Sansi said that he was very talented. When Her Majesty returned, she would be very happy to see his progress. Dragon Valley. After Gu Xingyin said that, she sat there quietly and closed her eyes to rest. The Golden Dragon King also lowered his eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. The two of them didn't speak, and none of the people underground dared to make a sound. For a moment, the atmosphere was quite serious. After the human prince got up from the ground, he sensibly stood aside. He knew the attitude of these two, and didn't dare to be presumptuous anymore. Soon, a powerful pressure enveloped the entire Dragon's Valley. Other than Gu Xingyin and Beemans, everyone felt like they couldn't breathe. Beemans snorted coldly and waved his right sleeve. Everyone suddenly felt relaxed. Wuxin, I haven't seen you for 1,000 years, and you've learned to use this kind of method to ensure your prestige? There was obvious mockery in his tone. He mocked Wuxin for not being popular. He still needed to rely on these unconventional methods to show his existence. Chapter 479. A chuckle seemed to ring in everyone's ears. A figure wearing a black robe slowly appeared in the air. As if he was stepping on an invisible staircase, he walked down from the air step by step. Wu Xian, you still like to play tricks? Beemans coldly snorted. The black-robed man had long black hair and black eyes, which was different from most of the people in the fantasy continent. Even his name, Wu Xian, was very different from the style of the fantasy continent. You're still so crude, Beemans. The black-robed Emperor Wu Xian's face did not show any anger, but his words were not polite at all. He then turned to Gu Xingyin and smiled. After not seeing you for so many years, Helena is still so charming. I admire you. Hearing him say this, Beeman suddenly sneered. You have a group of wives. What qualifications do you have to say such words? Many years ago, the two of them were in love with the elf queen. In a situation where he did not get a response, the golden dragon chose to stand firm, while the human emperor began to linger around. Gu Xingyin's mood was not very good. She originally thought that her lover in this world should be either Beemans or Wu Xian, but she did not expect that it was neither of them. System, my lover, will he be in this world? Her heart was a little panicked. Her connection with him was only in every world they met. Every time, she could rely on the unique mark on his body to find him. But what if he did not reincarnate with her? If he disappeared without a trace, then wouldn't she have no way of finding him? Fortunately, the system gave her a definite answer. Host, don't worry, he will be in every world. The system's answer made Gu Xingyin once again confirm that it knew many things about him, but due to some reason it could not tell her. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses and looked at the human emperor in front of her. Wu Xian, today you. She glanced at the well-behaved prince standing to the side and raised her chin. What is the meaning of this? The human emperor smiled carelessly. It's just a child who doesn't know any better. As he spoke, he waved his hand, and his black sleeve fluttered. The prince didn't even have a chance to react before he was reduced to ashes in front of everyone. Beemans put away the smile on his face and looked at him coldly. Beemans, you are getting more and more ruthless. He killed his own bloodline without any hesitation. Gu Xingyin also frowned. The human emperor in Helena's memory was not like this. Although that person was arrogant, he wasn't someone who would kill the innocent. The human emperor didn't even bat an eyelid. He's just an ant. What's there to feel sorry for? Gu Xingyin stared at him and said, Wuxin, at the beginning, you were just one of the ants in your mouth. Unlike her and the Beemans, who were born from a powerful race, the human emperor's experience was more legendary. He was originally just a commoner in a small town in the fantasy continent. Due to some chance encounter, he received the inheritance of an ancient mage. Step by step, he became the strongest person in the continent. As expected, when Wuxin heard this, displeasure flashed across his face. He snorted coldly and said, Let's not talk about the past. Gu Xingyin suddenly stood up. If it was my friend Wuxin, I would ask him if there was a problem, but who exactly are you? Chapter 480. No one knew what happened during that multi-race meeting. After that, the human emperor fell, and the elves went into hiding. On the fantasy magic continent, the dragon clan was rarely seen. Alinar had been waiting for the starlight flower to bloom, but he waited for many days, and there was no sign of the flower changing, until the elves who followed the queen returned to the starlight forest. Hearing the news of the elves' return, Alinar's first reaction was to take a look at the starlight flower on his bed. The petals were tightly closed, and there was no sign of it opening. Could it be that the queen lied to him? Alinar retorted, Impossible. A person like Her Majesty would not lie to him. He didn't think much and ran out of his palace like the wind, in the direction where the elves came back. However, he didn't see the figure sitting on the back of the moonlight unicorn. The elves who came back were all depressed and angry. Alinar saw that in the middle of the team, There was a carriage pulled by several unicorns. Alinar didn't know how. He suddenly felt sad, and he didn't know where this feeling came from. He just ran to the elf at the front. "Uncle Fit, where is the queen?" Fit recognized that this beautiful and cute elf was the queen's guide. Looking at the little guy's excited and expectant face, his face darkened. "The queen is sleeping in the carriage. You can go and see, but don't disturb her." Alinar quickly walked to the front of the carriage. The carriage was very high, even higher than his head. He used the flying spell he just learned. At this time, he was still thinking, if the queen asked how he got up, should he tell her? The elder said that the queen would be very happy. He carefully opened the curtain. The carriage was very spacious. He saw an emerald green vine bed in the center, and there was a soft light inside. Alinar knew that it was a magic lamp. Her Majesty the Queen lay peacefully on the vine bed. Her beautiful face looked even more attractive under the soft light than usual. Alinar gently walked to the Queen's side and whispered, "Your Majesty." He did not dare to speak too loudly for fear of alarming Her Majesty. However, he also hoped that Her Majesty would open her eyes and look at him. He had not seen her for several months. The person lying on the bed did not move at all. Alan squatted beside her until the curtain was lifted again. "Alan?" The people outside were obviously surprised that he was here. "Come down first. We need to bring the queen to the holy tree." Little Alan did not understand. "Why don't you wake Her Majesty up?" The elf looked a little sad, but she still comforted him softly. "Her Majesty the Queen is sick and can't wake up now. We have to take her to the holy tree to treat her illness." Eleanor was too small to help, so he just stood aside and watched as the elves came out. Then the elders cast some kind of magic on the sleeping queen. Finally, the queen was placed in a beautiful crystal box full of starlight flowers under the shade of the holy tree. Alinar looked at the starlight flower that had yet to bloom in his hand, and felt a little sad. He had learned a lot during this period of time, and was prepared to show it to the queen when she returned. However, the queen could not see it now. Chapter 481. Gu Xingyin didn't know how long she had slept for. When she woke up, the leaves of the elven mother tree rustled and circles of green light fell on her body, replenishing her body's energy. This was the holy land of the elves. Gu Xingyin sat up and found that she was lying in a crystal-like rectangular coffin. Was she the Sleeping Beauty? She thought in amusement. "System, how long have I been asleep?" she asked. At that time, she recognized that the so-called human emperor Wu Xian was actually a fake. Looking at the situation, the real Wu Xian had probably been assassinated long ago. She didn't know where that person came from. She and Beemans were only able to fight to a draw with him. Although they had the upper hand, they couldn't do anything to him. There had never been an expert of this level in the fantasy magic continent. In the end, she had Beemans cover for her, and used the elven race's strongest forbidden spell to kill that Wu Xian. However, the two of them had paid a heavy price. Beemans had to recuperate, and she had no choice but to fall into a deep sleep because she had exhausted her magic. "Host, you have been asleep for 1,000 years. The system answered her question. Gu Xingyin was shocked. "It's actually been that long." "Your Majesty." A surprised and unfamiliar voice appeared beside her ear. Gu Xingyin looked over with some confusion. It was a male elf she had never seen before. Like Helena, he had light green hair that reached his waist. His light green eyes were purer than the sky and were filled with pure joy. His skin was white and his appearance was more exquisite and beautiful than any elf Gu Xingyin had ever seen. She felt that his aura hadn't reached adulthood yet. Could it be that he was a newly born elf while she was asleep? Seeing the unfamiliarity in Gu Xingyin's eyes, the elf's eyes dimmed as if he was sad. "Your Majesty, you don't even remember me." Ever since the queen had fallen asleep, he would come to the Holy Land almost every day to see if the queen had woken up. The starlight flower made by Gu Xingyin's magic had always been placed in his bedroom. Every day, the first thing Alinar did when he woke up was to see if the flower had bloomed. However, 1 year had passed, 10 years had passed, and 100 years had passed. Little Alan had slowly grown up, and in a few days, he would reach his 1,000th birthday. He would officially be an adult, but there was still no sign of Her Majesty waking up. When he woke up this morning, he habitually looked at a certain spot at the head of the bed. He thought he was hallucinating. The starlight flower that had been dormant for 1,000 years had actually bloomed. In the early morning light, the pure white bud had completely bloomed. The little star-like stamen swayed gently in the breeze, as if it was saying good morning to him. Alan could swear to the goddess of nature that this was the most beautiful starlight flower he had ever seen in his life. Realizing something, Allenby rushed to the Holy Land with a nervous and expectant mood. He hoped to see what he wanted to see, but he was afraid that it was just an extravagant hope. He stepped into the Holy Land, and from afar he saw the person sitting up straight under the Mother Elven tree. 1,000 years had passed, and Her Majesty still looked the same as before she fell asleep. The child who liked to pester her and ask for hugs had already grown up. Chapter 482. Looking at the depressed look of the elf in front of her, Gu Xingyin looked at him carefully. The more she looked at him, the more familiar she felt his face was. A small figure suddenly appeared in the depths of her mind. Gu Xingyin suddenly thought of something. Alinar. Sure enough, when the elf opposite her heard her call this name, he raised his head in surprise and showed her a happy smile. Alinar was pleasantly surprised. Your Majesty still remembers me. Gu Xingyin wanted to cover her chest for a moment. This child had such a pure and beautiful face that it was otherworldly. Now that she showed such a trusting and joyful smile, even Gu Xingyin, who was used to seeing beauties, wanted to say, "That's cheating." Not to mention, this child who looked so well-behaved and delicate was raised by her. Gu Xingyin immediately felt guilty that he hadn't recognized her at the first moment. I just didn't think that my Alan would grow so big after just one night of sleep. Gu Xingyin slowly stood up. As she stood up, the crystal-like thing disappeared. She walked to Alinar's side and found that although this delicate child looked weak and slender, he was actually taller than her. My Alinar, you should be coming of age soon, right? She asked with a smile. When Alinar heard the words my Alinar from her mouth, he only felt his heart, without knowing why, beat fast. His face couldn't help but blush a little. A pink glow spread on his white jade-like skin, extremely moving. Gu Xingyin happened to tilt his head and saw this scene. He could not help but sigh in his heart again. I don't know what Killian's heart is made of. How could she be willing to use such a person like Alinar? When Alinar heard that the queen still remembered his coming-of-age ceremony, he was even more happy in his heart. Next month is the time. Her Majesty could come to his coming-of-age ceremony in person. He only felt that he could stand by the queen's side and do nothing extra, and he could feel incomparably happy and peaceful. This kind of feeling, even if his talent was praised by the entire clan, could not compare. He even thought that it would be great if time could stop at this moment forever. He would always be by the queen's side, and no one would disturb them. Unfortunately, the two of them didn't spend much time together. The news of the Elven Queen's awakening spread throughout the Elven tribe in a short period of time. All the elves spontaneously came to the Holy Land to express their most sincere blessings to the Queen. Alinar stood aside and watched the Queen smiling at the other elves with the same gentle and tolerant smile. He watched as the Queen looked at everyone with a gentle and caring gaze. Her gentleness belonged to all elves. He had never seen this matter so clearly before. This matter made him very unhappy. All the elves said that Alinar, the most beautiful and talented elf besides the queen, was a very generous and kind elf. His character was as good as his appearance, and he was as noble as described in the hymns. But only he knew that he was generous, tolerant, and kind because he never cared about those things. He was actually very selfish. The things that they truly cared about were things that they were unwilling to share with other elves. For example, the queen's gentleness and love. Chapter 483. Alinar. A worried call made him come back to his senses. Alinar looked up and found that the elves around him had left. Only the queen was standing by the side looking at him. He quickly revealed a shy smile and said, "I was distracted just now." Gu Xingyin smiled knowingly. The child has grown up and has his own worries. The elves held a huge celebration for the queen's awakening. Even Beemans, who was far away in the Dragon Valley in the north, sent a messenger to congratulate her. Everything was good, except for Alinor, which made Gu Xingyin a little annoyed. This child was going to be an adult soon. Why was he still so dependent on her? Every morning, when Gu Xingyin woke up, the first thing the head maid beside her reported was, "His Highness is waiting for you to have breakfast together." Alinor was by her side almost every day except for the time to rest at night. He was very talented. Now that he had mastered all the natural magic in the elves, he no longer needed to learn with the elders, so he had a lot of time to pester her. Every time Gu Xingyin helplessly hinted that he should go out and communicate with the elves more, Alinor would look at her with a particularly heart-wrenching gaze, making her have no choice but to admit defeat. What was even more frustrating was that Alinor was very popular among the elves. Even the head maid said to Gu Xingyin in private, "His Highness' reaction is normal. You are his guardian, but he fell into an unknown slumber when he was closest to you. His Highness has been here for so many years. Although he didn't show anything on his face, I don't know how sad and scared he is in his heart. Now that you have woken up, it is natural for him to stick to you." Gu Xingyin also felt that the child might be uneasy in his heart. He had to look at her every day to feel at ease. Today, she sat on the high elven throne, and Alinor sat on the side playing the harp for her. When it came to the harp, she had to praise Alinor's talent again. His talent was not only reflected in magic, but also in music, painting, and other artistic things. The results he showed also surprised Gu Xingyin. Such an elf was simply the most beloved child of the goddess of nature. The more outstanding he was, the more Gu Xingyin felt sorry for Alan in the original plot. She secretly made a decision in her heart. When Alan grew up, she would teach him some common sense. She must not let him be bewitched by that human girl, Celia. Such a beautiful Alan should not have such a miserable ending. "Ellen," she suddenly said. The melodious music stopped, and Alan looked at her with a smile. "Queen, what present do you want for your coming-of-age celebration in a few days?" Alan tilted his head and seemed to be thinking seriously. From Gu Xingyin's angle, she could see half of his exquisite and beautiful side profile. He was simply the most perfect creation of nature. After thinking for a while, Alinor shook his head and looked seriously at Gu Xingyin. Alinor used to think that during the coming-of-age ceremony, he would make a wish to the goddess of nature, hoping that your majesty could wake up sooner. Now that you have woken up, Alinor can accompany you every day. For Alinor, this is the most perfect life. Alinor has no other wish. In fact there was, but that kind of wish was too shocking, so Alinor did not dare to say it. He was afraid that if the queen knew about his selfish thoughts, she would hate him. Chapter 484. Gu Xingyin felt that Alinor was so well-behaved that it made her heart ache. Sure enough, he was a naive and pure elf. He didn't even have any excessive requests. However, the more Alinor said this, the more Gu Xingyin felt that as his guardian, she must do something for him. Soon it was Alinor's coming-of-age ceremony. Like every elf's coming-of-age ceremony, Alinor's coming-of-age ceremony was set in the Holy Land. However, it was different from the usual coming-of-age ceremony. A few years ago, an elf elder resigned from his position as an elder of the clan because he wanted to concentrate on studying ancient books. As the most talented elf in the past 10,000 years, Alan was promoted to the position of the new elder of the elf race. This was the same as the original plot. He became the youngest elder in the history of the elves. None of the elves felt jealous. On the contrary, they were all happy for Alinor. Looking at the unfake happiness and blessings on the faces of her clansmen, Gu Xingyin's heart was very clear. No wonder the world praised the elves so much. Although the elves had some strange habits, their hearts were undoubtedly the purest and cleanest among all the races in the magic continent. However, this was also related to the fact that they had been living in the Starlight Forest without worries. Alinor stood in the middle of everyone. There was a very senior elf in the clan who dipped a branch from the mother tree in the purest holy water from the spring of life, and touched his forehead. This was the blessing from the mother tree. Under the gaze of all the elves, Alinor's appearance suddenly changed. His general outline was still the same, but his originally delicate and beautiful androgynous face began to become more angular and defined. His figure also grew a little taller, and his eyes became sharp. His shoulders were also broader. Although he still looked like Alinar and was still incomparably beautiful, no one would mistake him for a woman anymore. He really changed from a teenager to a man. Next, it was the main point of the coming-of-age ceremony. The respected elders in the clan put on a woven crown for Alinar, and told others that this was an adult elf. Generally, the female elf's crown was a starlight flower crown. The male elves, on the other hand, wore a crown made of thorny leaves and leaves from the mother tree. For the elves, this was an extremely solemn ceremony. All of the elves remained silent in unison, waiting to witness this scene unfold. However, the elder who was supposed to wear the crown for Alan quietly retreated. Not far away, the elven queen was holding an exquisite leaf crown in her hands as she slowly walked over. Alan couldn't help but widen his eyes. Could it be? Thinking of a certain possibility, a hint of anticipation and excitement appeared on his calm expression. The elves around also reacted. Was the queen going to put the crown on Alinar's head herself? Many of them looked at Alinar enviously. What a great honor this was. Alinar was really a lucky elf. Gu Xingyin stood in front of Alinar. This child, after the coming-of-age ceremony, had grown taller again. She had to raise her head to look at him. These are the thorny leaves and holy leaves that I personally picked. It took me 3 days and nights to weave them. I cast protection and blessing magic on it. I hope it will bring you good luck and happiness. Chapter 485. Alinar lowered his head, and let the queen put the crown on his head. The two of them were very close, and Alinar could smell the faint fragrance of the queen's body. It did not belong to any plant that he knew, and it was the scent that belonged to the queen. Gu Xingyin took a step back and looked at her work with satisfaction. Compared to before, the male elf who had tied his hair behind his head had a valiant feel to him. She smiled and gently opened her mouth, completing the last step of the coming-of-age ceremony. The powerful and beautiful goddess of nature, you brought the sun, rain, and breeze to the earth. The grass sprouted under your feet, and the flowers bloomed in your hands. All the elves followed their queen and sang the praises of the goddess of nature. The elves believed in the most gentle and beautiful goddess. They believed that the elves, who were closest to nature, were created by this goddess. At this moment, Gu Xingyin realized that something was wrong. She looked at Alinar in surprise. If she did not react in time, she would have lost her composure. Her lover in this world was actually. When the last step of Alinar's coming-of-age ceremony was completed, a familiar throbbing came from the depths of her soul. The development of this fact was somewhat unexpected to her. She looked at Alinar with a strange gaze. Could it be that the elves had a special physique, so before coming of age, she did not recognize him? System, you should have known that Alinar was him, right? The system admitted very quickly, yes, host. Gu Xingyin laughed angrily, but you didn't tell me. Even when she mistakenly thought that her lover was the emperor or the golden dragon, the system did not stand up and tell her. The system's tone was very righteous. Host, you did not ask me. This is not part of my job scope. Gu Xingyin. I don't want to talk to you now. Please let me be alone. System. Gu Xingyin was a little troubled. She watched Alinar grow up, and looking at the way he relied on her, it was obvious that he was facing a trusted elder. Such an obedient child. She did not have the heart to do anything to him. Allenby felt that ever since his coming-of-age ceremony, Her Majesty had been looking at him strangely. Whether it was when he was communicating with her, or when he was playing the harp for her, she would often look at him with an inexplicable gaze, as if she was somewhat conflicted. Alan felt a little uneasy. Could it be that Her Majesty doesn't like my adult appearance? She preferred the soft and adorable type who would tug at her sleeves and act coquettishly. Unfortunately, one's appearance was not something one could control, and there was no way for him to revert back to his previous appearance. Alan thought with some distress. If Gu Xingyi knew what he was thinking, she would probably stop him immediately. Please don't. If it was raising a child, it wouldn't be a problem to raise an obedient, delicate, and cute child. But if it was a lover, That scene was really too much to imagine. However, Gu Xingyin was soon attracted by another matter. In this world, she Lily, the human girl with the protagonist aura, was born. Gu Xingyin had been paying special attention to the town where she Lily was born, and there were no abnormalities. Even when she was born, she was no different from an ordinary child. She did not show any heaven-defying luck at this time. Then, when exactly did she Lily start plundering the path of providence? Chapter 486. There was nothing more reassuring than personally verifying it. Moreover, Gu Xingyin brought Allenby with her when she went to the human world. Although she knew that he had become her lover in this world, and didn't have to worry about being attracted to and deceived by Cecily like in the original plot, Gu Xingyin still planned to bring him to the human world to see it for himself. Gu Xingyin cast a disguise spell on herself and Allenby. It couldn't be helped. The two of them were simply too eye-catching, and their long green hair and green eyes simply revealed their identities as elves. After the disguise spell was cast, the two of them looked just like ordinary humans with good looks. Although they were still a little eye-catching, they wouldn't cause any trouble. Queen Helena, what are we doing here? Allenby was still very unaccustomed to directly calling the queen by her name. The elven queen was a figure of worship among the elves. To directly call the queen by her name was simply too much and unforgivable in the eyes of the elves. Gu Xingyin spent a lot of effort, and Allenby himself had a little secret in his heart, to finally get Allenby to agree to directly call her by her name. Gu Xingyin also had her own selfish motives. If her lover didn't even dare to call her by her name, how could she expect him to do anything more disgraceful? I feel that this human baby girl is very unusual, so I specially came to take a look. Gu Xingyin replied. They were standing in a clothing shop in the town. Beside them, a lady was choosing fabric with a maid, and behind her, another maid was carrying a baby. It was Cecily. Unusual? Allenby carefully looked at the baby girl a few times, and didn't find anything wrong with her. However, a sense of vigilance rose in his heart. Her Majesty couldn't have taken a fancy to this baby, right? Although in his eyes, this baby girl wasn't beautiful at all, and couldn't even compare to any little elf in the Starlight Forest. What if the queen liked her? He didn't want another person to compete with him for the queen's favor. He was the only elf raised by the queen, and he was unique. Gu Xingyin didn't expect that Allenby would imagine so many things by himself, and even be wary of a baby like Cecily. Although the process was a bit ridiculous, she had achieved her goal. This way, it was even more impossible for Allenby to get close to Cecily. The two of them settled down as siblings in this small town called Locke. Originally, Gu Xingyin wanted to directly say that they were husband and wife, but this would probably scare Allenby. Slowly, they still had a lot of time, the lifespan of elves. Cecily grew, growing day by day, day by day. She didn't show any differences from other children's children. Gu Xingyin was now certain that she must have encountered some kind of fortuitous encounter at some point in time. It was very likely that she had obtained some kind of item or cultivation method that gave her the ability to plunder the providence of others. This was not mentioned in the original plot. At the beginning of the plot, Cecily was already a famous genius girl in the magic fantasy continent. All of this depended on Gu Xingyin to figure out by herself. Chapter 487. When she Lily was 6 years old, Gu Xingyin finally found a clue. She Lily was a very lucky girl. She was born into a wealthy family in a small town. Her parents doted on her since she was a child, and she had no siblings to compete with. This also formed her mischievous character. One day, she secretly got rid of the maid who was in charge of looking after her, and secretly ran to an abandoned house in her hometown. Creak, the dilapidated door was opened a crack, and a small figure sneaked into the old house that no one had entered for a long time. The thick layer of dust, the messy mess, and the things that ordinary people would hate and avoid were like a small treasure trove to she Lily at this moment. She found a broken rusty sword, a bronze mirror with simple patterns, and some other small things. A bottle in the corner aroused her interest. She laboriously moved away the obstacles around her, and her small body crawled in and took out the bottle. This was a very strange glass bottle. It was transparent, but there was a dark and mysterious unknown black substance inside, which looked like gas. If she Lily was not a 6-year-old girl, but an adult, she would definitely treat such a thing with caution. At least, she would not open it rashly. However, she Lily was not. She just looked at the bottle and found it very interesting. Without hesitation, she directly threw it to the ground. It did not break. This aroused her interest even more. The small child took out the broken sword she had just collected and slashed at the glass bottle, but it still did not break. She tried many methods such as throwing, knocking, hitting, but it was useless. The bottle still did not move. She Lily pouted and was about to cry. She sat on the ground angrily, but accidentally touched the broken sword with her hand. A drop of blood just happened to slide down her finger and dripped on the bottle. She Lily, who was suddenly injured, really cried this time. She no longer cared about the bottle and the broken sword, and ran out crying. No one knew that the drops of blood on the bottle had slowly seeped into the bottle bit by bit. Then, the bottle that she Lily couldn't open no matter what she did actually shattered just like that. A black stream of air floated out from the bottle, and condensed into the shape of a human face in the air. It seemed to be judging something, and then it chased in the direction she Lily left. It quickly caught up with she Lily, and then went into her body. She Lily, who was running, suddenly stopped. Her face suddenly twisted, and her eyes suddenly became pitch black. A strange smile appeared on her young face. After that, everything seemed to return to normal. "Miss, where have you been?" The panicked maid saw she Lily, and sighed in relief. "I saw a kitten just now. It went over there." She Lily pointed in a random direction. Her hand's fingers were clearly cut by the broken sword, but now there were no marks. The maid was not in the mood to care about the kitten. She bent down, picked up she Lily, and walked in the direction of the house. "Madam is still waiting for you to go back and have dinner with us." She did not see that she Lily, who was in her arms, showed a strange smile. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.